Welcome to First Christian Church's Adult Fellowship Bible Study. We continue in our study of the book of Isaiah. Today's lessons will be our last for a while. We're going to take our traditional summer break, and we'll reconvene this fall, shortly after Labor Day. Today's lesson covers chapter 11. Many scholars open up their commentary on this with some comments to the effect of a few chapters in the Bible are more loved or more poetic or more often thought of by Christians than this one. Christians interpret this as the prophecy of the Messiah who will establish peace on earth. Yet the word Messiah, or its Jewish equivalent, is not there. But many Jewish sects also interpret this chapter to be directed at a coming Messiah of the King David lineage. As we realize that Jesus came 800 years after Isaiah wrote this. So scholars have comments to the effect, so we should keep our minds open as we interpret this and try to understand what Isaiah intended when he wrote it. 16 verses in this chapter 11. We'll read all 16 verses in the New Revised Standard Version. A shoot shall come out from the stump of Jesse, and a branch shall grow out of his root. The Spirit of the Lord shall rest on him, and the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge and the fear of the Lord. His delight shall be in the fear of the Lord. He shall not judge by what his eyes see, or decide by what his ears hear, but with righteousness he shall judge the poor, and decide with equity for the meek of the earth. He shall strike the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips he shall kill the wicked. Righteousness shall be the belt around his waist, and faithfulness the belt around his loins. The wolf shall lie down with the lamb, and the leopard shall lie down with the kid, and the calf and the lion and the fatling together, and the little child shall lead them. The cow and the bear shall graze, their young shall lie down together, and the lion shall eat straw like the ox. The nursing child shall play over the hole of an asp, and the weaned child shall put his hand on the adder's den. Adder's den. They will not hurt or destroy on all my holy mountain, for the earth will be full of knowledge of the Lord, as the water covers the sea. On that day, the root of Jesse shall stand as a signal to the people. The nations shall inquire of him, and his dwellings shall be glorious. On that day the Lord will extend his hand yet a second time to recover the remnants that is left of his people from the Assyrians, from Egypt, from Pathros, from Ethiopia, from Elam, from Shinar, from Hamath, and from the coastal lands of the sea. He will raise a signal for the nations, and will assemble the outcast of Israel, and gather the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth. The jealousy of Ephraim shall depart, and hostility of Judah shall be cut off. Ephraim shall not be jealous of Judah, and Judah shall not be hostile towards Ephraim. But they shall swoop down on the backs of the Philistines in the west. Together they shall plunder the people of the east. They shall put forth their hand against Edom and Moab, and the Ammonites shall obey them. And the Lord will utterly destroy the tongue of the sea of Egypt, and will wave his hand over the river with the scorching winds, and will split it into 7 channels, and make a way to cross on foot. So there shall be a highway from Assyria for the remnant that is left of his people, as there was for Israel when they came up from the land of Egypt. Scholars are very quick to open saying this entire reading is almost totally metaphoric, and that we must keep that concept in place as we study this. Academic scholars notice this chapter is organized around the themes of Israel's restoration and a just ruler. Dr. Christopher Seitz writes, an opening 9-verse oracle concerning the royal house is there. That is followed by scenes of gathering of the dispersed Israelites into a strong nation that stands against its once hostile neighbors, while peacefully getting along with one another, and peacefully a peacetime will dominate. It opens in verse 1 and again in verses 10 and 11, as the two sections divided, concerning a sprout from the stump of Jesse. What does this mean? Dr. Seitz suggests your understanding or interpretation of that is critical to understanding this chapter. First, it is metaphoric and not literal, he says. He notes that it begins with "on that day," which implies an eschatological or futuristic expectation to be interpreted and applied here. The stump indicates that something larger has been cut down or fallen down, but not totally destroyed, not totally killed. Sprout means a new generation of life emerges from that stump or from that source. This reduced life in the stump is Jesse. So who or what is Jesse? Jesse was the father of David, and David was the first king in the Davidic line. It is the restoration of that line genetically and its religious mission, he says, that is envisioned here. The tree metaphor comes from the previous chapter in which he referred to the trees. It is the royal line that has been reduced to a stump, but not totally destroyed. That destruction was coming at the hands of Assyria. Dr. Gene Tucker, in that I should say, Assyria destroyed large number of Israelite people and Judean people. So most of the people of descendants of Jacob have been destroyed or taken into exile. And they had besieged, of course, Jerusalem. But Jerusalem did not completely fall. The temple was saved. Dr. Gene Tucker of Emory University, in his commentary, taught that the first temple religion taught there in, as you can clearly see in Samuel 7, that confidence in the reign of David's king in Jerusalem was to be celebrated in their worship. And then he says, you see in Psalms 2, Psalm 45, Psalm 72, and Psalm 110, as well as some other Psalms and other places, that's exactly what they're doing, that they're worshiping that line. That is, thanking God for that line. So such was a core tenet of their religion by Isaiah's time. So here, Isaiah saw the Davidic monarchy, David's lineage, as Lord God Yahweh. In other words, the God that they referred to their God as Yahweh, meanings of implementing that God's plan. In other words, David would be responsible for ruling the nation in such a way that that religion was preserved. That well, at that time, after the Assyrian invasion, Judah rest only. In other words, that God's will to be carried out rest with the only leftover king, and that was Hezekiah. And that small remnant of Judah and Jerusalem remained after the Assyrian siege. He sees this salvation occurring as those who escaped, re-immigrated out of. There's good evidence that a lot of those people in that area saw what was happening, and they actually took exile in neighboring countries out of Judah as well as some out of Israel, and that they're returning, restoring the temple, the religion, and they clean that religion up. After all, even though the physical temple was there, physical temple wasn't destroyed. The religion that was coming out of that temple was very idolatrous. So therefore, that religion had to be cleaned up. That remnant will return to do God's will. First, in its own restoring its religion, and then serving as a place the world as a whole could see that God's will was being done. As time progressed through the centuries, this hope became the concept of the Messiah, he says. God's anointed one. But that word Messiah, nor the Hebrew root, nor the anointed one, is not here in this writing of Isaiah, which are critical terms, he says, if they were specifically referring to the Messiah. Dr. Tucker and many other scholars concur with that this is generally what they're dealing with. So by Jesus' time, interpretation, as well as continued to be modified later, even by us today, had evolved. Since it didn't actually happen that way, then it must still be on down the road for that Messiah to occur. Buried in this idea is the concept, not actually said here, he says, but implied, that the Spirit of God, the wisdom and understanding and counsel associated with God, will be imparted into the rulers who continue to fear that God and obey God. We should pause just for a moment and make sure we understand this word fear, meaning what it means. It means reverence, respect. Solomon prayed for that he would have understanding to fear God. Practical wisdom to rule correctly. That fear or reverence for the Lord is itself a great gift, notes several scholars. It is from that gift of fearing the Lord, respecting the Lord's way, that a righteous ruler will rule, rather than just relying totally on his own talents and his own direction. Notice that scholars point out how this ruler will administer. There in verses 2 through 5, I believe it is. It's very early in the read. One thing caught my eye in particular. He will not be swayed by money, politics, be influenced. by what he sees or what he hears, but by the righteousness, by the wisdom imparted by God. He will judge the poor and the meek with equality based on need. And then I've added, and not by bribe or not by monetary influence. In verses 6 to 9, there suddenly is an abrupt shift in this metaphoric description in which they pair predator and prey that will reside peacefully together. This scholars are all the scholars that I saw, all of them pretty well said we cannot take this literally. This is metaphoric. In other words, the terms are there implying that transformation will be so great that it would be the equivalent of these things happening. The natural order of things will be changed, is the idea here, says Dr. Seitz. This is metaphoric and not literal, he says. These beasts could actually refer to nations, notes several scholars, and some scholars then go through who those beasts were, different animals were considered to be in that day and time. In verses 10 through 16, the general theme of the return of the remnant of both Israel and Judah is there. It starts off with an announcement concerning the descendants of David. Dr. Seitz teaches that on that day, God will extend his hand in justice towards those people and not in judgment. In other words, his judgment had already been executed against them in the form of allowing them to be punished, to try to bring them back to their senses through Assyria. That's over. It's now justice. It is stretched to repopulate the land and reestablish the vineyards. The vineyard concept, and again, metaphoric, meaning the people returning will be following God's will. Good vines, high quality people. The nation listed there, likely, are some of those where the Israelite people have been dispersed or found exile. The disagreement that separated Ephraim, that is Israel, and Judah, the southern tribe, will disappear. They will reunite and forget their differences and come to agree and follow Yahweh again and not foreign gods. Scholars do not agree as to the time this prophecy directly relates. Some argue strongly it was near term, that is, associated with this late 8th century BC period and following the Syro-Ephraimite War and Assyrian War, and shortly after Jerusalem's siege. Others say, no, this has got to be a lot later, and it's the Babylonian exile, which is 200 years later. Others say, no, 1949, when post-World War II. Others, no, it still hasn't occurred, which is generally the Christian concept. It will come at the end of time. It's prophecy for end time, a future time, an idealistic time. Dr. Seitz notes the second Isaiah, meaning chapters 40 through 55 in this book, are silent on this restoration of a Davidic kingdom. And he says that should get our attention. Is that because by this time it had already been fulfilled? Or is it he has nothing to add? He sort of sees that as the only two reasons why the second Isaiah wouldn't have taken this same concept and built on it. Clearly, this return of exiles is similar to the Exodus story, much parallel. This is related to salvation, as the way the Israelite people, the Exodus story, the Passover event, all that is considered the salvation story to them. This is another version. Thus, it is a salvation idea, note several scholars. There will be a highway for the Assyrians to facilitate the return back. In other words, that's highway, the steps involved here. A idea relates to the parting of the Red Sea, a similar type of event. In other words, God will remove those obstacles and make it possible for these people to return to the Holy Land. Scholars also note that, like the Egyptian exiles returning, this is much metaphoric detail is given, yet other comments are missing. Nowhere in the reading is the word king used here, nor is there an image of an anointed one. We assume they're there, they say, but they are not so stated, notes the scholars. Some of the characteristics of the ruling person here clearly do not fit our image of Jesus. This is entirely too military involvement for, they say, for this to fit the Christian Messiah. I hope this gives you some idea of how some of the scholars look at this. Clearly, this much metaphoric language, it's clearly open to a wide range of interpretations. But one scholar closes by saying we must always remember when we're reading things, especially religious material, that our preset paradigms, have we been taught in the past, keep us focused in an area, and we have great difficulty moving outside those paradigms. And so therefore it's difficult for people of various religious denominations, sects, and so forth to read this and come up with any kind of new thinking relative to it. In other words, we're often fixed in where our paradigm has us set. But they urge us to look at this, trying to understand what did Isaiah mean when he wrote it. Hope this gives you something to think about. Have a good Bible study and have a good break during the summer, and we'll see you in return this fall.